Hey everybody, you let me know if you can hear me fine. Appreciate it. We'll let a few people get on. I was having trouble with internet this morning, getting it connected. Maybe they don't want us talking about this stuff, huh? I gotta file some war crimes complaints against Google. So that's on my list of to-dos, my mini list of to-dos. Thank you for letting me know. You can hear me. And we'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll go ahead and get started on this. We're going to do a presentation on war crimes. They're everywhere. And we need to recognize when they're engaging in these war crimes. Hello from New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey too. Ocean City, New Jersey right now. 2 blocks from the water. No, it's live. I mean, we're talking right now, right? You're hearing me. I'm answering your questions. I don't know how more live you can get. I'm not sure where Elizabeth, New Jersey is. Well, I haven't been outside today, so I really can't say. I had to get this thing going, and I was having trouble with my internet, and so I've been messing around with that, trying to get it going. So I don't know. I don't think it's blowing. Usually you can tell if it's windy outside, and right now there's no evidence from inside that I can see. So I'd say it's probably pretty quiet. Usually I go and ride the bike on the boardwalk, get a little exercise every day. But when I'm doing this, you know, I'm kind of stuck. You know what I mean? Newark, okay. So that's quite a ways away from here then. Okay, well, we're going to get started. This one's on war crimes. The reason we all need to know that there's war crimes going on, because if you want to file criminal complaints, that's one of the war crimes you want to file, right? I file all sorts of criminal complaints against them, and get the FBI to go down and talk to them. So war crimes are everywhere. I mean, they're doing war crimes, and so we need to look at some of these war crimes that they're engaged in, and some of them are encoded in their codes. I went and filed cashapp is a good example. Cashapp, I had cashapp for a few years, and then all of a sudden they were wanting a social security number, and so I filed a war crimes complaint against them for coercing information from me that's none of their business. Okay, that's a war crime, and we're going to go through that. And I sent it to the Pentagon and to the Provost Marshal General in Washington D.C. And then I didn't access Cash App for about 6 months. And what happened was every time I'd open up Cash App, it'd go directly to a window that wants a social security number and it won't let me go past it. And so anyways, so I waited 6 months and I didn't access the Cash App. And then one day I thought, well, I wonder if anything's happened with that Cash App. And I went and opened it up, and it didn't go to that window wanting a social security number, and I've been using it ever since. Again, you have to know that there's war crimes going on, and file complaints. And things will change. If you don't complain, nothing's going to change. And that's one reason I do this stuff, because I happen to understand it a little better than a lot of people. But I also try to educate other people about it, because I can't do it all by myself. I mean, there's way too much. Other people have to be doing it too. So I'm hoping to educate people, and so other people can do it too and understand how it's happening. So first of all, I'm not a liar. Well, I meant a lawyer. No, I meant a liar. You should never take my word for anything. You should always do your own research. I provided references to aid you in your research, and I don't know everything. I'm open to ideas. There's 4 types of people you'll meet in your life. There's the people who try to wake up the slaves. I kind of like to think I'm one of those. There's the slave masters. There's the people who have no idea they're slaves. There's lots of those. And there's the people who like being slaves. Which one are you? Do you really know for sure? Are you who you think you are? If you can see through the illusion, then you are the solution. If the people do not know their basic rights and freedoms, then how can they know when or if their rights and freedoms are being infringed? And that is so true, and that's why I do these videos, because it make you aware. You know, it's like, you know, once the what is it, when Christ went and took the stuff off the guy's eyes, he can see, right? The what do they call it? There was some sort of a something over his eyes that was keeping him from seeing. And never forget, the men who started this country were marijuana growing, whiskey drinking, tax evading rebels who left their beds at night to shoot at the cops. And that's true. That's exactly what they were. George Washington was a hemp farmer. So we gotta, I think the biggest thing we can do is start going after the tradition of the founders. Who were they? And become more like them. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. That's so true. Well said, Thomas Jefferson. So under the Lieber Code, martial law, have to understand that martial law is here first for starters, okay? The Lieber Code was written by Francis Lieber for Lincoln in the Civil War, okay? And it's the law of the armed forces. In the Civil War, that's probably the beginning of what are now all of these military manuals, these training manuals, they got dozens of them now. It was the beginning of it, I guess. Anyways, a place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying army, whether by any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. The fact that there's the presence of an army there means you're under martial law by definition. Martial law does not cease during the hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the commander-in-chief or by special mention in a treaty of peace concluding the war. Well, and there's actually a bunch of ways you can get martial law. There's more than some. Then we'll talk, there's a Supreme Court case, Ex parte Milligan, that talks about it. But so, 3 kinds of martial law. So, but in the case of Texas and the southern states, and actually, if you go back to the Royal Proclamation of 1763, it says that everything west of the colonies at that time was Indian territory, and you had to have a passport to go there. Well, gee, that sounds like martial law. We're going to talk about passports. So, anyways, so they there's a lot of reasons why martial law is everywhere, okay? And there's evidence of it, and we'll talk about the evidence too. So, in the case of the southern states, okay, Civil War states, there's been no special proclamations ordered by the Commander-in-Chief. The Commander-in-Chief is the President of the United States in our case. And there's been no special mention in a Treaty of Peace. There was no Treaty of Peace with the southern states, okay? I live in Texas. And so Texas is one of those states. And so you have to understand that martial law continues to this day, and there's ways of telling that you have martial law. Under the international law of warfare, all parties to a cause must appear by nom de guerre, because an alien enemy cannot maintain an action during a war in his own name. And so, nom de guerre, that's that all block capital letters name. That's a fictitious war name. Okay, a mixed war is one made on one side by public authority and the other by mere private persons. Okay, so it's warfare. Everything is warfare. All these court cases, you go into court, it's warfare, and it's all warfare. You have to understand that the best defense is a good offense. You got to understand what's going on, and you got to go on the attack. And that's why I do my criminal complaints. I use their codes, and I go after them. Okay. Now, common law still exists. Okay, you can still have common law there, and they understand that. But martial law works on presumption, and they presume you're one of the slaves, and until you defeat their presumption, you are one of their slaves. And but it's all about warfare. It's all about warfare. Martial law is international law. It's part of international law, and so it's a subset of international law, and so it's actually private international law. It goes back to the Roman cult is where it goes back to. But so anyways, governments or any sovereign descend to the level of a mere private corporation and take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen where private corporate commercial paper is concerned, and securities is concerned. For purposes of suit, such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. And that's true. Okay, that's why Federal Reserve notes are such an important part of the martial law. Okay, and they need to get rid of the Federal Reserve notes. That's one way you'll be able to tell if we don't have martial law anymore. We'll be going back to gold or silver coin. That's common law. Then things are paid for, and we're going to talk about what Federal Reserve notes are. Okay. Article 2 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. Okay, if you go into the war crime statute in 28 U.S.C., we talked about it yesterday, 2441, it talked about the Geneva Conventions, the 4 Geneva Conventions that were signed in 1949. I'm just checking the comments, see if anybody has any comments. And so far, no. So Article 2 of this convention shall also apply at all cases of partial or total occupation of the territory of a high contracting party, even as said occupation meets with no armed resistance. Okay? So partial or total occupation. This is the causes and necessities for taking up arms. 1775, the Founding Fathers understood this. I don't know. I think it's because they're putting fluoride in the water, they're dumbing people down, they want to kill a bunch of people off, or I think they do, in my opinion. Martial law supersedes and replaces common law. Okay? So if you're in that jurisdiction, the question is, are you in that jurisdiction? Statutes have been passed extending the courts of Admiralty and Vice Admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law, and instead thereof the publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. So the Founding Fathers understood this. And for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. A despotism is a dictatorship. They understood. That's why that was the causes and necessities for taking up arms 1775. That was the beginning of the War of Independence. In the meantime, civil law is the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood to follow the law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is the law, then it follows its own course rather than following common law, thereby destroying the common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. So they're basically talking about the same thing that the Founding Fathers talked about in the causes and necessities for taking up arms. This is taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. So it's all tied to these. That's why all these courts, the judges all wear black robes. Okay, that's a military uniform, and they're bail priests. They're Satanists. Okay, don't get me going. And we're going to go into that. Actually, the presentation we're going to do in the afternoon is going to be on bar members and our Satanists. Okay, and that's going to be the one this afternoon. Anyways, there's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its commands or crimes. Well, that means you're under martial law. That's a perfect reason. Okay, there's no common law offenses, and so that's everything becomes statutes. That's why they put civil law. Okay, that's where civil law comes from. Is all these codes. I'm going to be checking from time to time on these comments and see if there's anybody that has any questions that wants them answered. And so wow, you're watching my video while driving a tractor trailer, or at least listening to it. I suppose you're listening to it, and that's great. I mean, when I'm traveling, it's better than listening to the radio, and you learn something while you're doing it. That's good. Anyways, under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. That means you're under martial law. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. And you'll find it in every state. Arizona, same thing, okay? All common law offenses and affirmative defenses are abolished. No conduct or omission constitutes an offense or affirmative defense unless it's an offense or affirmative defense under this title or another statute or ordinance, okay? And Arizona statutes. This is all Arizona statutes. The common law only so far as it's consistent with and adapted to the natural and physical conditions of the state and the necessities of the people thereof, and not repugnant or inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States or the constitutional laws of the state, or established customs of the people of the state, is adopted and shall be the rule of decision in all courts of this case. In other words, this is lawyers come up with this stuff, you know. But the bottom line is they have to make a statute to adopt common law. Okay, that's true. But that's under their codes. You got to understand. There's two jurisdictions. Okay, so remember what happened is there was a civil war. In Arizona's case, it's the Treaty of Hidalgo. Okay, there is a treaty in Arizona's case. It's called the Treaty of Hidalgo, and that actually the United States got Arizona. I think I'm not sure if California's included in that. Arizona goes to the Rio Grande River, so it's half of New Mexico under that treaty. And Colorado, there's a bunch of territory, Nevada, that was picked up by the United States that was part of the Treaty of Hidalgo. Anyways, in the Treaty of Hidalgo, it doesn't say anything about a martial law ending. Okay, and so martial law continues to this day. And so then everything has to be done by statutes, by codes. Everything's an Admiralty, okay? That's why they have courts of appeals, okay? A writ of error doth not lie upon a sentence in Admiralty, but an appeal, okay? So that's why they have courts of appeals. The courts of appeals are all over the place. State courts of appeals, federal courts of appeal, it's all Admiralty. Appeals are an Admiralty, that's why it's called a court of appeals. It's the same thing that precipitated the War of Independence. Police use military rank structures, captain, lieutenant, sergeant. Military script circulates for money, Federal Reserve notes, Bank of Canada notes, Bank of England notes. Okay, that's all military script. Okay, that's not money. Okay, military uniforms used by police and judges. The wearing of a clerical dress or religious habit on the part of lay folk is liable to the same penalty on the part of the state as the misuse of the military uniform. This is Article 10 of the Concordat of 1933 between Hitler and the Roman cult. So this is worldwide, folks. This is worldwide. It's not just in America. We now live in a nation where doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, and the press destroys information. Religion destroys morals, and our banks destroy the economy. Ain't that the truth? Well said, Chris Hedges. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants. Actually, I need to change that. It's actually on my website, because the Yahoo group has been deleted by Yahoo. It can be found on my website. There's a page, if you go to my website, if you go to the front page of my website, there's a link for free videos and documents. So there's two links. Well, there's other links too, but you'll see there's two links. There's one for free videos and one for documents. The free videos are YouTube videos that I've put on one page organized by topics. So there's links to YouTube videos, and so it's a lot easier if you want to study and learn based on a topic. To go there and study it that way, so you'll be able to go to my YouTube videos and search for them, and well, you won't have to search for them. You just go and find the one you want to watch and click on the link, and it'll take you there. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 50 searchable law dictionaries. Actually, all of the stuff is on thumb drives now because it's getting to be too much. And other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Let's a thumb drive. Actually, there's a lot more than 50. Anyways, donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the military script, the Federal Reserve notes, the PayPal gifts, the checks, the money orders. Send me an email for particulars. Note, under martial law, only the criminal jurisdiction of a military court is the recognized law, but as Article 3 says, the civil courts can continue wholly or in part as long as the civil jurisdiction does not violate the military orders laid down by the Commander-in-Chief or one of his commanders. By this means, a military venue, jurisdiction, and authority are imposed upon the occupied populace under the disguise of the ordinary civil courts, and officers of the occupied district or region, because of the so-called civil authorities in an occupied district or region, only act at the pleasure of a military authority. It should also be noted here that the several state legislatures, county boards of commissioners, and city councils are constantly legislating to please the edicts of the federal government, the occupying force. Actually, in this case, it actually should be national government, and that their legislation in this sense is not an exercise of state sovereignty, but instead a compliance with the edicts of the military force which occupies the several states, and consequently are edicts of martial law rule. And that's taken from a book called The Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. In the case of occupied territory, this is Article 6 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. In the case of occupied territory, however, the occupying power shall be bound for the duration of the occupation to the extent that such power exercises functions of government in such territory by the provisions of the following articles of the present convention. So there's a bunch of articles in the Geneva Conventions that apply for the duration of the occupation. Okay? And so they still apply today. The high contracting parties specifically agree that each of them is prohibited, this is Article 32, from taking any measure of such a character as to cause physical suffering or extermination of protected persons in their hands. This prohibition applies not only to murder, torture, corporal punishment, mutilation, and medical or scientific experiments not necessitated by the medical treatment of a protected person, but also to any other measure of brutality, whether applied by civilian or military agents. Okay, so, you know, again, that's, what do you think this forced medical experiment that they're doing nowadays is? That's exactly what it is, and that's how you explain it. If you were listening to the criminal complaints that I filed, that's what I call it, because that's what it is. Okay, it's a forced medical experiment. Okay. You're not asking for their medical treatment. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was adopted as Treaty 95-20 by Congress. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that too, because then that makes it treaty law, the supreme law of the land. And this is Article 7 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. No one shall be subjected to torture, cruel or inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. In particular, no one shall be subjected without his free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. And so, free consent, okay? And so, that's Article 7 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and that was adopted as Treaty 95-20 by Congress. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit. Don't forget to like this video on YouTube. Don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. On Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. This is the front page of my YouTube channel. The subscribe button, if you notice the arrow, the subscribe button's already clicked because it's not red. Usually they're red. And the bell has not been clicked. That's the notifications bell. And so that's why the arrow's pointing at it. It'll look like it's vibrating if you click the bell. A penal action, okay? So penal, it's an important word, okay? In Texas, it's called the Texas Penal Code, okay? A penal action is an action on a penal statute, an action for recovery of penalty given by statute, okay? Where an action is founded entirely upon a statute, the only object of it is to recover a penalty or forfeiture. Such action is a penal action. The words penal and penalty in their strict primary sense denote a punishment, whether corporal or pecuniary, imposed and enforced by the state for a crime or offense against its laws. The noun penalty is defined as forfeiture, to be forfeited for non-compliance with an agreement. It's all about business. It's commerce, okay? The words forfeit and penalty are substantially synonymous. It's all business. They're a bunch of pirates and thieves. A penal action is founded entirely on statute, and the only object is to recover a penalty or forfeiture imposed as a punishment for a certain specific offense, while a remedial action is one brought to obtain compensation or indemnity. Penal action is a civil suit, so there's nothing that's really criminal, okay? Penal action is a civil suit brought for recovery of a statutory forfeiture when inflicted as punishment for an offense against the public. Such actions are civil actions. On the one hand, closely related to criminal prosecutions, and on the other, actions to private injuries in which the party agreed may by statute recover punitive damages. That's why I go after the bar members, okay? Because they're required to know, okay? I go for the jugular on the bar members. They are the low-hanging fruit. If you think that this is for your protection, you clearly have no idea what's going on. Yeah, the Supreme Court, and the comment here about the Supreme Court, it's interesting about the Supreme Court because I think it was the Ex parte Milligan that case that they brought down, and Lincoln actually sent troops to the Supreme Court. And now, if you look in the Supreme Court rules, Rule 45, it says all mandates from the Supreme Court come under authority of the President of the United States. And so the Supreme Court is not independent, okay? They're controlled and governed by the President. So there's no separation of powers. Lincoln sent troops to the Supreme Court, and that's been ever since. My contact information, my blog is SovereigntyInternational.wordpress.com. My website is SovereigntyInternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page, I deleted it due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group called Sovereignty International is being deleted. You know, I haven't been to Facebook in months, and I have really no interest in going there. You got to pick your battles. And so you know, what I ought to do, I need to do, is ban each person off of that group, because Facebook is profiting from that group. They're collecting data on all those people on that group, right? And so I need to ban them off of that group and then delete the group. If I just go away and leave the group, well, then the group will still be there, and they'll be collecting data off them, okay? And so, but I don't want to go to Facebook. There's 19,000 people on that group. I don't want to go there and spend all the time and effort it would be to ban them off of that group. That's a major pain in the butt. So I just haven't been there for months. Anyways, maybe I'll file criminal complaints against the board of directors and the CEO for propaganda for war, for war crimes. There's lots of war crimes. We're going to go through that one here in a little bit. And so I've got a private group on freelist.org. It's called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants, and I got a Google private group called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants. I really need to file war crimes complaints against Google. They've actually taken my group down twice now for censorship, and so you know, I really need to file war crimes complaints against them. Follow me on Twitter at EngineerWin. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. I've got a BitChute channel, Sovereignty International, and a Patreon channel. All I need is a contract, okay? Or what they view to be a contract. It's Roman law, okay? International law. It's impossible to prove jurisdiction exists absent a substantial nexus with the state, such as a voluntary subscription to a license. All jurisdictional facts supporting claim that supposed jurisdiction exists must appear on the record of the court. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holds, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits, while the season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. To be bound in conscience to account to assestic use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. And it's still, this is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. It's still the foundation of modern conveyancing. Assumpsit. In its origin, a contract of tort, assumpsit was soon transported into an action of contract, becoming afterwards a remedy where there was neither tort nor contract. It's a quasi-contract. It's a fictitious contract, based at first only upon an express promise. It was afterwards supported upon an implied promise, even upon a fictitious promise. Introduced as a special manifestation of the action in the case, it soon acquired the dignity of a distinct form of action, which superseded debt, became concurrent with account, with case upon a bailment, a warranty, and bills of exchange, and competed with equity in the case of essentially equitable quasi-contracts. You notice it's equitable, okay? Equity. That's all important. These words are very important. Growing out of the principle of unjust enrichment, surely it'd be hard to find a better illustration of the flexibility and power of self-development of the common law. Oh, how he goes, it's common law. You know, it's like the history of assumpsit, and that's taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition, page 379. So, obviously it's written by a lawyer, scumbag bar member. Both in Roman and English law, there are certain obligations which were not in truth contractual, but which the law treats as if they were. They are contractual in law, but not in fact, being subject matter of a fictitious extension of the sphere of contract to cover obligations which do not in reality fall within it. Yes, that's true. There are statutes that say that you got to have a driver's license to rent a car. That's why I keep one, but so I haven't surrendered it. I just don't give it out. I travel all over the place. I go internationally sometimes. I haven't actually traveled internationally in years, but if you want to rent a car, you got to have a driver's license. Okay, constructive quasi-contracts are based solely upon the legal fiction of the law. That's why they have to assault you with that Roman cult cestacate trust. It's well-settled rule of law that he who seeks benefits of contract must also assume the burdens. Voluntary acceptance of benefit or transaction is the equivalent to consent to all obligations arising from it so far as facts are known or ought to be known to person accepting. A quasi-contractual action presupposes acceptance and retention of a benefit by one party with full appreciation of the facts under circumstances making it inequitable for him to retain the benefit without payment of the reasonable value. Okay, it's all about equity, it's all about martial law, and it's all about the cestacate trust. Why do you think they want a social security number when you apply for a driver's license or unemployment insurance or a passport or any other benefit? You know, jail's a benefit. That's a benefit. You're getting free room and board. The rights of sovereignty extend to all persons and things not privileged that are within the territory. They extend to all strangers resident therein, not only to those who are naturalized, those who are domiciled therein, having taken up their abode with an intention of permanent residence, but also to those whose residence is transitory. All strangers are under the protection of sovereign while they're within his territory and owe a temporary allegiance in return for that protection. See, and this is Carlisle versus United States, U.S. Supreme Court, 1873. And the important thing here is that everyone and everything not privileged, right? Not privileged. Did you know that discharging debt with limited liability is a privilege? That's right. Discharging debt anytime you use a Federal Reserve note, unless you have a little disclaimer there, then you just participated in a privilege, or they can presume that you participated in a privilege, and so therefore you're not sovereign. A kangaroo court is a term descriptive of a sham legal proceeding in which a person's rights are totally disregarded, in which the result is a foregone conclusion because of the bias of the court or other tribunal. Kangaroo courts are everywhere. Judge works for the state, prosecutor works for the state, police or witness works for the state. The vast majority of the disputes that the police initiate on behalf of their employer are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the police, the only witness, also the police, all represent the same party. And since no corpus delicti, mens rea, or actus reus can be produced, doesn't technically qualify to be heard according to its own laws. The state, therefore, is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. And that's true. That's exactly the case. I have exclusive content available on my website and on Patreon. My website has 2 subscription levels, and I accept cryptocurrencies. The basic subscription level is $49.99 a year for the videos only. My platinum subscription level is $79.99 a year for the videos plus unlimited consultations. Now, I am not a liar. Well, I'm an attorney. But I can tell you what I would do under certain circumstances and where to find the forms. So the unlimited consultations are limited to emails. Okay, if you want voice consultations, then you're going to have to pay give me a donation. I never ever tell people what their donation should be, but I would suggest that you consider how much of my time you think you're going to need and what you think my time is worth. So I never ever tell people what their donation should be. And if you don't give me enough of a donation, if I wind up having to do a lot of work, I'll tell you that I need another donation. I mean, that's no big deal. The only power that the New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit. I cannot fight all the battles. I need other people doing it and being on point. Some of my exclusive content is an Arlington private information share, land deed training. There's actually a couple of them on land deed training, and I need to maybe do another one because I have updated that. Estoppel certificates training, foreclosure estoppel certificates training. Estoppel certificates training is my notice and demand that I send to chiefs of police and county sheriffs and those kinds of people. Corporate denial training, toll roads notice and demand training, invoice training, notice of void judgment training, revocation of signature training, third-party witness training, federal habeas corpus training, revocation of voter registration, criminal complaint training, lawsuit training. I need to do some more criminal complaint training because I need to update it with my latest procedures. Lawsuit training, I've got one video on that. I probably need to do some more. And then other training, if anybody's got any requests, I'm open to ideas, but it's got to be something I haven't done already, or it's got to be something that I can do, or that's appropriate. I have to be careful about, I mean, that's why I haven't done a lot of stuff on lawsuits, because it's got to be generic, and educate people about how to do a lawsuit. Whoops, what happened here? Oh, 2 pages. Oh, okay. That's interesting. I guess I can delete that first page. And then I have a Patreon. You can, all exclusive content available on my website. Oh, here. I'm also going to have Northeast Private Information Share videos. They're up there. Some of them are public. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free on my 2 private groups at free lists and Google Docs and my website. All exclusive content is on my website, and you can buy a subscription there. And I also have a Patreon. This is Article 8 of the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of civilians in a time of war of 1949. This is like really, really powerful, because they can sit there and say, well, you consented. Well, no, actually, under the Geneva Convention, you can't give up your rights. So don't give me that crap about consenting. Protected persons may in no circumstances renounce in part or in entirety the rights secured to them by the present convention and by the special agreements referred to in the foregoing article, if there such there be. So you cannot give up your rights guaranteed under the convention. Civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature or from international law. So all of that is civil law. Or Roman law. The reason they want martial law is because martial law creates civil law. Civil law they can change. Nothing's absolute. They have to make statutes, bought and paid for clerks masquerading as judges. Anytime there's a statute, it's always a bought and paid for clerk masquerading as a judge. Statutes are changed all the time. Under civil law, your rights are defined. Under common law, your rights are absolute. And under common law, you have unlimited rights. And so, under civil law, it's only what they decide to give you. So that's a lot of reasons why they, and it's all part of martial law. This is Article 27 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. Protected persons are entitled in all circumstances to respect for their persons, their honor, their family rights, their religious convictions and practices. That's why they make it really severe to use force to subject you to forcefully prevent you from practicing your religious beliefs. Okay, and that's why there's a friend of mine that actually gets bank accounts without give them a social security number, because he says it's a religious objection, and he goes and sends something to their bar members, and no problem. Anyways, they shall at all times be humanely treated. They shall be protected, especially against acts of violence, threats thereof, against insults and public curiosity. Women shall specially be protected against any attack on their honor, in particular against rape and forced prostitution or any form of indecent assault. Without prejudice to the provisions related to the state of health, age, and sex, all protected persons shall be treated with the same consideration by the party to the conflict whose power they are, without any adverse distinction based in particular on race, religion, or political opinion. And so I go after them for taking reprisals against me for my political opinions, okay? You know, the reason I even figured this out, quite frankly, the big reason is when the FBI came to see me back, you know, probably about, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now. That's one thing they kept saying is, oh, that's my opinion, or political opinion. They called it a political opinion, and it never dawned on me on the time. And so until I started reading this, and I realized that they were talking about war crimes. The party to the conflict in whose hands protected persons may be is responsible for the treatment according to them by its agents, irrespective of any individual responsibility which may be incurred. And so they're responsible regardless, okay? And so that's another thing I need to put in. I need to put in these war crimes complaints. Because they're responsible regardless of whether they're going to hold their pig accountable. They're responsible. The corporation's responsible. No physical or moral coercion shall be exercised against protected persons, in particular to obtain information from them or third parties. Right? That's what I told them when they were demanding a social security number. Okay. No physical or moral coercion shall be exercised, in particular to obtain information from them or from third parties. Okay, so it's none of your damn business. That's what I'm going to be going after with Google for wanting me to log in. Okay, just now when I tried to log into my YouTube account, they wanted to send a code to my phone, and so it's none of the damn business what my phone number is. And so I'm going to file a war crimes complaint against their chief counsel. And their chief counsel is supposed to know the law. And it's none of their damn business what my phone number is or what any information is. And it's a war crime for them to try and get it. And it's part of their tracking, okay? It's part of they want to know everybody's business. And they could use it, this could be used against the NSA, the CIA, Facebook, okay? Banksters compelling disclosure of a social security number. It can also be used against pigs when they extort and coerce information from you on the side of the road. Okay? It's war crimes. No protected person may be punished for an offense he or she has not personally committed. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or terrorism are prohibited. A military uniform is designed to be intimidating. Okay? So they're intimidating you just by talking to you. Pillage is prohibited. When they take your property and they seize your vehicle, that's pillage. Reprisals against protected persons and their property are prohibited. They're taking reprisals against me. Article 33 of the Geneva Convention, terrorism. Terrorism is a system of government that seeks to rule by intimidation. Gee, that's, and back here it talked about terrorism, right? One of the ones we just talked about terrorism. They can't do terrorism. We talked about it earlier. Can you spot the terrorists? Terrorism is use of violence and intimidation in pursuit of political aims. There's a whole bunch of terrorists in that picture. It's exactly what they are. The taking of hostages is prohibited. This could be used, Article 34, when they force your wife to live in a foreign country because she does not have a green card, because they're holding her hostage until you accept their slave status. It is, however, true in all common law countries, it has always and consistently been held that the wife and minor children take the nationality of the husband and father. That is common law doctrine. And taking of hostages, they're assaulting you, kidnapping you, holding you hostage for their Roman cult sesticate trust. Matter of fact, I'm going to make a note about that one, because that's a war crime, and they're holding me hostage for their Roman cult sesticate trust. I got to make a war crime for that. Make a note. Yeah, that's perfect. Occupying power may not compel protected persons to serve in its armed forces or auxiliary forces. No pressure or propaganda which aims at securing voluntary enlistment is permitted. Okay, that's why they can't do conscription. Okay, they have to get you to volunteer for the selective service. Article 51 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in the time of war of 1949. Check out my video on do-it-yourself how not to volunteer for the selective service in the draft video. No contract or agreement or regulation shall impair the right of any worker, whether voluntary or not, whether he may be applied to the representatives in order to request the power's intervention. All measures aiming at creating unemployment or restricting opportunities offered to workers in an occupied territory in order to induce them to work for the occupying power. That's all in Article 52. Filing fees, okay? Impair the right of a worker, voluntary or not, to apply to the representatives for protecting power in order to request the power's intervention, okay? And so these bought and paid for whores that dismiss a case because you don't pay the filing fee, that's a war crime. Any destruction by the occupying power of real or personal property belonging individually or collectively to private persons or the state or to public authorities or to social or cooperative organizations is prohibited. That's Article 53. And now it's talking about their penal provisions. Remember we talked about that. Penal code, penal provisions. That's breach of contract. Okay? Again, you're talking about the non-political military courts. Well, they're definitely military courts, but they are political too. In the case of a breach of penal provisions promulgated by virtue of the second paragraph of Article 64, the occupying power may hand over the accused to its properly constituted non-political military courts on condition that the said courts sit in the occupied country. Courts of appeal shall preferably sit in the occupied country. They want to maintain the illusion for the sheeple. All people have a right to self-determination by virtue of the right they freely determine their political status. That means that you have a right to say that you're not a U.S. citizen, okay? And that's under Article 1, Clause 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and which was adopted as Treaty 95-20. And so that's where their problem is, okay? And so you have the right to decide, not some bought and paid for whore masquerading as a judge, and not some low intelligence thug that's working for their criminal corporation. The state parties to the present covenant, including those have responsible for administration of self-governing and trust territories, okay, well, that's what happens when you're under military occupation, shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination and shall respect the right in conformity with the provision of the Charter of the United Nations, okay, so they're supposed to promote it, and they're perjuring their oath of office by failing to support the supreme law of the land. All persons shall be equal before the courts and tribunals in determination of any criminal charge against them or his rights and obligations in a suit at law. Everyone shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing by a competent, independent, impartial tribunal established by law. That's Article 14, Clause 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Any propaganda for war shall be prohibited by law. Article 20. So all their lies they're trumpeting over the media are a breach of the supreme law of the land. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was adopted by Congress as Treaty 95-20 and under Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution, this Constitution and the laws of the United States which will be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the constitutional laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So it doesn't matter what states' codes say. In all cases, the duration of the period during which the protected person accused of offense is under arrest awaiting trial or punishment shall be deducted from any period of imprisonment awarded. Check out my other videos: Bankster Thieves Playlist, Roman Cult Playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 7, Do-It-Yourself How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft, Martial Laws Here, Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax, Do-It-Yourself Free Mail, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1 through 17, Canada Border Pigs Playlist, Bar Members and Their Satanic Connections Playlist. Now this is Article 7. This is the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court. The U.S. has not adopted or acceded to this statute, but Canada has. So a lot of countries have. And so in the U.S. it's good to bring it up because it talks about war crimes. And so I tell them in my documents that the government hasn't acceded to it, but it's good to describe what war crimes are. For the purpose of this statute, crime against humanity means any of the following act when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack. Okay, enslavement, imprisonment, or other severe deprivation of physical liberty in violation of fundamental rules of international law, torture, persecution against any identifiable group. Okay, gee, that sounds like sovereign citizens. Collectively on political, racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, gender as defined in paragraph 3 or other grounds that are universally recognized as impermissible under international law. So it's a crime against humanity. War is business. In Canada, they're persecuting anybody they call freemen on the land. In the USA, they persecute sovereign citizens. When a judge is a bought and paid for a clerk, it is a satanic religious ceremony. They're persecuting you because you wish not to participate in their Satanism. When a judge is a bought and paid for a clerk, it's not a fair and regular trial. When the civil, they're saying it's criminal, it's not a fair and regular trial, and they do that all the time. Article 70, protected persons shall not be arrested, prosecuted, or convicted by the occupying power for acts committed or opinions expressed before the occupation or during a temporary interruption thereof, with the exception of breaches of the laws and customs of war. Nationals of the occupying power who, before the outbreak of hostilities, have sought refuge in the territory of the occupied state shall not be arrested, prosecuted, convicted, or deported from the occupied territory except for offenses committed after the outbreak of hostilities or for offenses under common law committed before the outbreak of hostilities, which according to the law of the occupied state would have justified extradition in a time of peace. No sentence shall be pronounced by the competent courts of the occupying power except after a regular trial. That means due process. And they never give you, they always deny due process. This is a standing army you're told not to tolerate. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or terrorism are prohibited. Okay, and remember we talked about terrorism. It's a system of government that seeks to coerce people, a system of government that seeks to rule by intimidation. There we go. Military uniforms are designed to be intimidating. The carrying of guns by their code enforcers is intimidating, especially if they have laws preventing you from owning guns. If the pig yells at you because you're not cooperating, it's threatening and intimidating. No protected person will be punished for an offense he or she has not personally committed. Like collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation, terrorism are prohibited. Pillage is prohibited. Reprisals against protected persons or their property are prohibited. That's Article 333. They're assaulting you for the crimes of their fraudulently created cesticade trust. In Canada, they regularly seize people's vehicles that are not registered. Any restraint, however slight, upon another's liberty to come and go constitutes an arrest. An illegal arrest is an assault and battery. The person so attempted to be restrained of his liberty has the same right to use force in defending himself as he would in defending any other assault and battery. Each person has a right to resist an unlawful arrest. In such a case, the person attempting the arrest stands in the position of a wrongdoer and may be resisted by the use of force as in self-defense. The Rome Statute, the court shall have jurisdiction in respect of war crimes, in particular when committed as part of a plan or policy. For the purpose of the statute, war crimes means grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions of August 12th, August 1949, namely aimed at the following acts against persons or property: extensive destruction and appropriation of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly, compelling a prisoner of war or other protected person to serve in the forces of the hostile power, willfully depriving a prisoner of war or other protected person of the rights of fair and regular trial, unlawful deportation or transfer, or unlawful confinement. And here's some more. Other serious violations include the following acts: intentionally directing attacks against individual civilians not taking part in hostilities, intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects, that are not military objectives, intentionally launching an attack in the knowledge that such attack will cause incidental injury to civilians or damage to civilian objects, which would be clearly excessive in relation to concrete and direct overall military advantage anticipated, destroying or seizing the enemy's property unless such destruction or seizure be imperatively demanded by the necessities of war, declaring abolished, suspended, or inadmissible in a court of law the rights and actions of the nationals of the hostile party. They do that all the time. Pillaging, committing outrages upon personal dignity, including humiliating and degrading treatment. For the purpose of this statute, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction in whole or in part, forcefully transferring children of the group to another group. Okay, so if they steal your children and you're a state citizen, then your children are state citizens, state nationals, I would not state citizens, then that's genocide. In Canada, they're engaging in genocide against freemen on the land. In the U.S., they're engaging in genocide against sovereign citizens. If they steal your children because you don't want to register them, that's a form of genocide. Crime against humanity means murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, imprisonment, torture, sexual violence, persecution, or any other inhumane act or omission that is committed against any civilian population or any identifiable group, and that at the time and in the place of its commission constitutes a crime against humanity. Genocide means, we already talked about that, war crime means an act or omission committed during the armed conflict that in the time and in the place of its commission constitutes a war crime. That's under the Canadian. This is the Canadian Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act of Canada. And so Canada, you can go after them for war crimes. I would, for sure. 18 U.S.C. 1091, genocide, whoever, whether in time of peace or time of war, with the specific intents to destroy or in whole in a substantial part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, subjects the group to conditions of life that are intended to cause the physical destruction of the group in whole or in part, transfers by force children of the group to another group, shall be punished as provided in subsection B. That's like death penalty. Every person guilty of an indictable offense, this is the Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act of Canada again. Every person is guilty of an indictable offense who commits genocide, a crime against humanity, or a war crime. Every person who conspires or attempts to commit is an accessory after the fact in relation or counsels in relation to an offense referred to in subsection 1 is guilty of an indictable offense. Punishment, every person who commits an offense under subsection 1 shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life if an intentional killing forms the basis of the offense, and is liable to imprison for life in every other case. So up to life in prison. That's in Canada, in communist Canada. The definitions in this subject apply to this act. This is more Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act. Conventional international law means any convention, treaty, or other international agreement that is enforced to which Canada is a party, that is enforced with the provisions to which Canada has agreed to accept and apply in an armed conflict to which it is involved. International Criminal Court means the International Criminal Court established by the Rome Statute. So I have plates available and laminated sheets with there's some of them are Texas codes. There also there's a bunch of them. They're Kangaroo court survival sheets, some other things. Okay, this is a picture of one of the Texas plates that I have available, and here's another one. Some of them you can get them with sui juris, or you can get them with individualized numbers. They're also in yellow with the yellow background, blue text, or you can get them with gray background with blue and yellow text, and so those are images of them. I like the Texas plates because they can be used anywhere, because all states, Canada and Mexico included, are required to recognize Texas law. A political subdivision of the state may not require an owner of a vehicle to register the vehicle, pay a motor vehicle registration fee, or pay an occupation tax or license fee in connection with the motor vehicle. And that's Texas Transportation Code. This is more Texas Transportation Code. This chapter applies to a motor vehicle owned by the state or a political subdivision of the state. This chapter does not apply to a motor vehicle while it's owned or operated by the United States, the Postal Service, or military vehicles. You can get one plate and one probable cause laminated sheet for 3 pieces of silver, 1 troy ounce each, or $60 in military script. That's fake money, Federal Reserve notes. Before you do this, you need to be prepared to defend it. But that is why I have the card laminated sheet in my car, because of the discussion should end right there when I show them that nobody's required to register their vehicle. My PayPal, engineerwin@hotmail.com. You can get Forbidden Zone laminated sheets from catman1@gmail.com. Before any police officer stops you, they must have probable cause. Article 4 Amendment prohibits law enforcement officers from arresting citizens without probable cause. Arrest made without probable cause violates the 4th Amendment. Holding involuntary civil confinement is a massive curtailment of liberty, is tantamount to infringement of being arrested, and can be made only upon probable cause. So this is my probable cause laminated sheet, one side of it. And the test for it talks about, there's court citations, and there's also some Texas codes about Class C misdemeanors and what a crime is in Texas. The test for the police officer's sufficient basis for probable cause: did the officer have a sufficient basis to make a practical common sense decision that a fair probability of crime existed? Once the officer's actions fail to satisfy the test, it may appear that no reasonable objective officer could have believed that probable cause existed. In Texas, they're not authorized to enforce the transportation code, so they don't have probable cause under any circumstances. That's why I filed my criminal complaints against them. The 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, citing cases from the U.S. Supreme Court, the 5th, 7th, 8th, and 9th Circuits, held that by definition, probable cause to arrest can only exist in relation to criminal conduct. Civil disputes cannot give rise to probable cause. And this is the backside of that same the probable cause one, false arrest, and it talks about false arrest, and there's some stuff about again the Texas Penal Code. Perhaps it should be mentioned that a general rule of a person is placed under arrest when he's deprived of his liberty by an officer who intends to arrest him. It is not always necessary for the officer to make a formal declaration of arrest. A motorist stopped by a traffic officer for a traffic offense would be considered arrested, even if the motorist is not specifically enforced that he had been arrested. Any restraint, however slight, upon another's liberty to come and go as one pleases constitutes an arrest. This is all on that document. A Class C misdemeanor, an offense under this section, is a Class C misdemeanor if the offense for which the actor's appearance is required is punishable by fine only. Okay? And conviction of a Class C misdemeanor does not impose any legal disability or disadvantage, and an individual judged guilty of a Class C misdemeanor shall be punished by fine only, not to exceed $500. A crime means a misdemeanor punishable by confinement, which is jail, or a felony, and so therefore Class C misdemeanor is not a crime. Class C misdemeanor fails to be a crime when it's by definition a civil matter, and this is Texas Transportation Code, failure to pay civil penalty. If the owner of a motor vehicle fails to timely pay the amount of civil penalty imposed against the owner, an arrest warrant may not be issued for the owner, and the imposition of the civil penalty may not be recorded in the owner's driving record. And so, again, it's a civil penalty. It's a civil matter. In Texas, a police officer may not arrest you for a Class C misdemeanor, and they do it, and if they do it, it's false arrest. It's actually a traffic offense. They're not authorized to enforce the transportation code, and at least in Tarrant County, and every county they're only authorized 5 traffic safety officers, and that's it. The only thing the plaintiff needs to do is allege false arrest is either that the defendant made an arrest or imprisonment, or B, the defendant affirmatively instigated, encouraged, incited, and caused the arrest or imprisonment. When the plaintiff has shown that he was arrested, imprisoned, or restrained of his liberty by the defendant, the law presumes it to be unlawful. The burden is on the defendant to show the arrest was by authority of law. If the owner of a motor vehicle fails to timely, that we already read. A capias is not a warrant of arrest. That's down on the bottom here. There we go. And this is Texas Transportation Code, means a writ that is issued. A capias means a writ that is issued by a court having jurisdiction of a case after judgment and sentence. They can't issue one until there's after judgment and sentence. They do it all the time. And it's a dead instrument. Capias is not a warrant of arrest. And they do it elsewhere too. It's a bench warrant. So, public servant commits an offense if with intent to obtain a benefit or with intent to harm or defraud another, intentionally knows, misuses government property, services, personnel, or other thing of value belonging to the government that has come into the public servant's custody or possession by virtue of the public servant's office or employment. That is abuse of official capacity. A person commits an offense if he refuses to give his name, residence, address, or date of birth to a peace officer who has lawfully arrested the person and requested the information. That's failure to identify. This is official oppression. A public servant acting under color of his office or employment commits an offense if he intentionally subjects another to mistreatment or to arrest, detention, search, seizure, dispossession, assessment, or lien that he knows is unlawful, intentionally denies or impedes another in the exercise of enjoyment of any right, privilege, power, or immunity, knowing his conduct is unlawful. For purposes of this section, a public servant acts under color of his office or employment if he acts or purports to act in official capacity and takes advantage of such act or purported capacity. That's official oppression, and that's a Class A misdemeanor. And they're doing that because they don't have authority to stop you for the Transportation Code. Impersonating a public servant. This is a Class 3 felony in Texas. Impersonating a public servant. A person commits an offense if he impersonates a public servant with intent to induce another to submit to his pretended official authority or rely on his pretended official acts, or knowingly purports to exercise any function of a public servant or public office, including that of a judge in court, and the position or office through which he purports to exercise a function of a public servant or public office has no lawful existence under the Constitution of this or laws of the state or of the United States. It's a felony of the third degree. And so when those cops are stopping you on the side of the road for Transportation Code offenses and they're not authorized to enforce the Transportation Code, then that's impersonating a traffic safety officer, and that's a felony. Anytime you sign anything, I've signed plea bargains and bonds by putting without prejudice. When you put without prejudice, there's no contract. And so definitely just print there without prejudice. Do it all the time. 18 U.S.C. 241, if two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, intimidate any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the constitutional laws of the United States, or because of his having so exercised the same, they shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. That's conspiracy to violate rights under color of law. And when they go and screen their pigs for low intelligence and give them a gun and send them out to assault people for transportation code offenses when they know they don't have authority to enforce the transportation code, then that's conspiracy. And that's a violation of 18 U.S.C. 241. And we went through that yesterday when we talked about it, the criminal complaints. Whoever, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any inhabitant to any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, immunities secured, protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. And that's another thing they do when they assault you for transportation code offenses, when they don't have authority to enforce the transportation code. That's a good example of that as well. Whoever in any circumstances referred to intentionally obstructs by force or threat of force, including threat of force against real property, any person, the enjoyment of that person's free exercise of religious beliefs. So this is one that's very severe. They can get life in prison over this. 18 U.S.C. 2707, they're good faith. They like to claim, oh gee, I didn't know. Okay? And once you notify them, they can't claim that. That's the reason I send out my notice and demand. A good faith reliance on a court warrant or order, a grand jury subpoena, a legislative authorization, or a statutory authorization, including a request of a governmental entity under Section 2703F of this title, a request of an investigative or law enforcement under Section 2518.7 of this title, or a good faith determination that Section 2511.3 of this title permitted the conduct complained of, is a complete defense to any civil or criminal action brought under this chapter or any other law. So again, if they can claim good faith, then, and that's why I sent them out the notice of demand. That's the estoppel certificates. If you need some help with anything and you want to make a donation, send me an email to engineerwin@yahoo.com. If you plea bargain something, then that's a problem. If you didn't plea bargain, then you can probably get it removed. Subject matter jurisdiction. They didn't have subject matter jurisdiction in the first place. Got to be able to prove it, but probably do that. Texas Code of Criminal Procedure. No evidence obtained by an officer or other person in violation of any provisions of the constitutional laws of the state of Texas or the Constitution of the United States of America shall be admitted in evidence against the accused on the trial of any criminal case. B. And this is, it is an exception to the provisions of subsection A of this article that the evidence was obtained by a law enforcement officer acting in object of good faith reliance upon a warrant issued by a neutral magistrate based on probable cause. And so if they can claim good faith, then, and that's why you have to neuter it. You have to send them a notice and demand, and it has to be upfront. Government officials are required to know the law. Government officials are required to know that a warrant may not be issued for a capias. A capias may only be issued after they get jurisdiction and hold a trial and get a conviction. Any denials of due process or bad behavior, they always deny due process in countless ways. That's why I recommend you have one of my Kangaroo Court Survival laminated sheets with you in their so-called court. Matter of fact, I don't even go in their so-called court, quite frankly, unless they're dragging me in there. And like for traffic offenses, I don't even go. I don't even go. And I'll bury them criminal complaints. I'll file dozens of criminal complaints into the case, and file bar grievances and judicial complaints against the judge. You know, that's, yeah, for sure. The judicial power shall be vested in one Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges both of the Supreme Court and inferior court shall hold their offices during good behavior. Okay, and so all you have to do is find them acting in bad behavior, which is always, and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. This is the good behavior and bad behavior laminated sheet, and we'll go through some of the text. Fraud upon the court is fraud which is directed to the judicial machinery itself and is not fraud between the parties or fraudulent documents, false statements, or perjury. It's where the court or a member is corrupted or influence is attempted, where the judge has not performed his judicial function. In other words, where the impartial functions of the courts have been directly corrupted. This is the back side of that. Bad behavior, it's a fundamental right of a party to have a neutral and detached judge preside over judicial proceedings. There's no such thing. Jurisdiction can be challenged at any time. Jurisdiction once challenged cannot be assumed, must be decided. Once challenged, the jurisdiction cannot be assumed. Where there is no jurisdiction, there is no discretion to ignore lack of jurisdiction. Where jurisdiction is contested, the burden of establishing it rests upon the plaintiff. The burden of proving jurisdiction rests upon the party asserting it. Courts must prove on the record all jurisdictional facts related to the jurisdiction asserted. However late the objection to jurisdiction has been made or may be made in any case, any cause, in an inferior or appellate court of the United States, it must be considered and decided before any court can move one further step in the cause, as any move is necessarily the exercise of jurisdiction. The court has no jurisdiction to determine its own jurisdiction, for the basic issue in any case before a tribunal is its power to act, and a court must have the authority to decide that question in the first instance. A departure by a court from those recognized and established requirements of law, however close apparent adherence to mere form and methods of procedure which has the effect of depriving one of a constitutional right is an excess of jurisdiction. The burden shifts to the court to prove jurisdiction. The fact that the petitioner was released on a promise to appear before a magistrate for an arraignment, the fact is circumstance to be considered in determining whether in first instance there was probable cause for the arrest. It is impossible to prove jurisdiction exists absent a substantial nexus with the state. All such as a voluntary subscription to a license, all jurisdictional facts supporting claim that supposed jurisdiction exists must appear on the record of the court. When liberty and freedom are at stake, your silence isn't golden, it's yellow. Subject matter jurisdiction. At the bottom of the sheet here. Where a court failed to observe safeguards, it amounts to a denial of due process. Court is deprived of juris. Not every action by any judge is an exercise of judicial function. It's not a judicial function for a judge to commit an intentional tort, even though the tort occurs in the courthouse. When a judge acts as a trespasser of law, when a judge does not follow the law, the judge loses subject matter jurisdiction, and the judge's orders are void and have no force and legal effect. And that's really, it's never about in rem jurisdiction. It's always about subject matter jurisdiction. And you can catch them denying due process anytime they do anything. Deny due process anything, they lose subject matter jurisdiction. If a court determines at any time that it lacks subject matter jurisdiction, the court must dismiss the action. Defense of lack of jurisdiction over subject matter may be raised at any time, even on appeal. Thus, the judicial tribunal has no jurisdiction on the subject matter on which it assumes to act. Its proceedings are absolutely void to the fullest extent of the term. The county attorneys represent the state in all cases in the district and inferior courts in their respective counties. Although probable cause may be inferred from malice, malice may be inferred from lack of probable cause. And so, if the cop is stopping you on the highway for a transportation code offense in Texas, he doesn't have authority, then he doesn't have probable cause to stop you, and so then it's a malicious prosecution. If they continue with it, it's a malicious prosecution. And that's why a lot of my cases get dropped. They just disappear because they know that it's going to be, that's the issue that I'll bring up. I'll sue their butt off. Void judgment. A universal principle as old as the law is the principle is the proceedings of a court without jurisdiction are a nullity, and its judgment therein without effect either on person or property. When a judge acts where he or she does not have jurisdiction to act, the judge is engaged in acts or acts of treason. A court cannot confer jurisdiction where none existed and cannot make a void proceeding valid. It is clear, well-established law that a void order can be challenged in any court. Where there is no jurisdiction, there is no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been the law from the days of Marshal Saya. And that's a federal case, Manning versus Ketchum, citing U.S. Supreme Court, Bradley versus Fisher, and they're citing 10 Coke 68, which is Coke in the 1500s. Brutum fulmen, an empty noise, an empty thread, a judgment void upon its face, which is in legal effect no judgment at all, by which no rights are divested, from which none can be obtained, neither binds nor bars anyone. A little story. I went and filed a lawsuit in state court against FedEx and FedEx removed it into federal court. I didn't want it in federal court, so I told the judge, I have nothing but contempt for your so-called court, and I demand that it be remanded back to state court. And one of the things I told him is everything he does is void and brutum fulmen, he's in his so-called court. I called it a so-called court, and he has an inferior court of limited jurisdiction. I went and I just nailed him. Anyways, I've never had a judge be so nice to me after that. I felt guilty almost, except that he ultimately dismissed the case, and when he dismissed it, he mentioned that I called his judgments brutum fulmen, An officer who acts in violation to the Constitution ceases to represent the government. Judges loses his absolute immunity from damning actions only when he acts in clear absence of all jurisdiction or performance of an act which is not judicial in nature. When he's a bought and paid for clerk, maybe? In arriving at our decision in this matter, we do not depart in any way from our holding in Himling versus Jensen that the doctrine of judicial immunity extends to courts of limited jurisdiction. But when a minor magistrate acts wholly without jurisdiction, civil liability attaches for his malicious and corrupt abuse of process and his willful and malicious oppression of any person under the pretense of acting in his official capacity. This is Texas Penal Code 3711, and it's an impersonation. And paragraph 2 says, knowingly purports to exercise any function of a public servant or a public office, including that of a judge in court, and the position or office through which he purports to exercise a function of public servant or public office has no lawful existence under the constitutional laws of the state or of the United States. So if he's impersonating, if he's outside his authority, think about it, if he's outside of his authority, then he's not a judge anymore, okay? He's impersonating a judge, and that fits right there. And they do it all the time. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. Subject matter jurisdiction, and that's why I build a case. I do not even go in their so-called court. I get a police report for evidence, I file a challenge to jurisdiction, a demand for an examining trial, and dozens of criminal complaints. And that's my normal procedure when they think they're going to stop me. Recently I was stopped by Colleyville police in Texas, and what happened is that it turned out to be because my license plate, I had a temporary plate on my car, and I had a plastic cover on it because I didn't want it to, the temporary plate's good for a year, so I didn't want it to get damaged. So I had a plastic cover on it, and to cover it up so that it wouldn't get damaged. And so what happened was this cop, I guess they couldn't read it, it turned out, after it was all over, couldn't read it or something. So they stopped me, and I had my hand on the stern wheel, and I said, where's the emergency? I see you got your emergency lights on. Where's the emergency? And there's a lady. She says, this is a traffic stop. We need driver's license, registration, insurance. And I said, oh, so you're investigating me? And I said, well, under the Fifth Amendment, I don't have to give evidence against myself. And she said, well, if you don't give it to us, we're going to arrest your butt and take you down and put you in jail. And it went back and forth like that several times. I had a friend of mine that witnessed it all, so it was great for the criminal complaints. Anyways, so then what happened is she finally speaks into her radio there, sovereign citizen need backup, and 4 more cops show up. So then I give her my Republic of Texas diplomatic ID card, and I say, okay, I'm going to go to the police station. And I said, okay, I'll be there. And I went to the police station, and I said, okay, And I said, I'm a senator with the Republic of Texas, and I'm a protected person under international law. And she looks at it and she says, Glenn Fern, you're Glenn Fern? So I know they're taking my name in vain. And so the point being is that if you establish yourself properly, she could have read that plate. I don't think she would have. If she would have known that it was me, she wouldn't have stopped me, I'll bet you. So anyways, so that's the way it goes. So anyways, it's a denial of due process. They don't have authority to stop you. They don't have authority to, in Texas, to, the Colleyville is in Texas. I'm in New Jersey now. I never have any trouble outside Texas, quite frankly. But, so, she, it's, again, if there's no breach of the peace, then they don't have authority to stop you. And when you know, they're wanting you to volunteer and give them information. And when I went and I have a witness to all of this, I'll bet you she gets fired at a minimum, and I'll bet you her chief gets fired, because this is not the first time I've had a run-in with Colleyville. And she had obviously been told by the chief, don't be messing, it's not her, probably all of them. You know, the chief had told him, leave Glenn Fern alone. Anyways, so I went and I still went through the same procedure. Okay, I got a police report, I filed a challenge to jurisdiction and a demand for an examining trial, and then I filed dozens of criminal complaints. And with that particular chief of police, I had sent him one of my notice and demands, and so I did it with Bedford too. Okay, the same thing happened with Bedford, and Bedford's kind of interesting. Bedford's another city near Colleyville, next door, and what happened there was I sent the chief of police one of my notice and demands, and the notice and demand says, I accept your oath of office. If you think you're representing me, you're fired. It's about 20 pages. I go through the law, explain how we're under martial law, and they have good faith until I take away their good faith. And so now I put them at the very end, or towards the end, I say you're now put into estoppel, and if one of your subordinates says anything to me, then you'll be guilty of multiple felonies. And so then, about 9 months later, the Bedford cop stops me for having a Republic of Texas plate on my car, and arrests me and does all sorts of shit. And so anyways, so then I sent a nastygram to the chief of police of Bedford. And the nastygram starts off, it says, normally I say I accept your oath of office, but you and me both know that, you and I both know that you have no intention of honoring your oath of office, so fuck your oath, you lying, perjuring motherfucking son of a bitch. And then the second paragraph says, if you or your pigs want a piece of me, you just name a date, time, and location, and I'll come armed. We'll settle it for once and for all, you lying, perjuring motherfucking son of a bitch. And it's about 20 pages of that, right? And also, when I do those, I send them to everybody and their brother. So right up at the very top is a list of everybody who gets it. You know, the FBI, the Texas State Police, the Provost Marshal General in Washington, D.C., and Donald Trump got a copy too. And, you know, they never tell you what they do. Nothing ever comes back, okay? But a friend of mine was talking to the mayor of Bedford about, I don't know, 6 months or so after that, and the mayor told him what happened, said that the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement raided the Bedford Police Department, fired everybody that was in there, except for 2 people, and now they can't even use their own jail. They have to send them over to a neighboring city, to the jail. So things happen. I'm telling you that if you lay your foundation properly and have your ducks in a row, and things will happen. And I think that's why, you know, the same thing at this neighboring, because the same thing happened with the Colleyville police. Okay, I sent them a notice and demand, and then I sent them what I call my nastygram, and they obviously told that cop, leave Glenn Fern alone, and so again, if you lay your foundation properly, and that was what I was going to talk about next. Okay, I just told you about Colleyville, about Bedford. Well, there's another thing I can tell you about is Euless. I had a run-in with Euless too. It's another neighboring city there. I mean, this like they like to. They're a bunch of tyrants. Okay, Texas is a police state. It really is, and so but Euless, they actually dropped a case. I'll show it to you. The dismissal. They dismissed a case that they brought against me, and I'll even show you the police report. I ordered a police report, and there's a lawsuit going on with them right now, in fact. And this is why you get the police report, okay? Because they always give you great evidence. Always, always, always get a police report. I'll show you the dismissal first of all. Yep, this is it. So this is the dismissal. And it looks pretty standard until you get down here at the end. Other, in the interest of justice, okay? So what they're doing is they're throwing the cops under the bus. That's what they're doing. And this is a dismissal with this case in Euless. And notice it says State of Texas. Well, I have a a certificate of fact from the Texas Secretary of State's office saying that State of Texas is a DBA for Deer Park Cash Cow. Deer Park Cash Cow LLC. And so I put that on all of my stuff. So anyways, so they dismissed it in the interest of justice. So then let's look at the police report. And the police report just says it all, I'm telling you. So it's been redacted because they like to collect all sorts of garbage on you, you know. So they give me these 2 citations right here. So that means they want Federal Reserve notes, right? They want Federal Reserve notes. That's perjury of oath. And so that's, if you listened yesterday to the meeting, to the event yesterday, I went through perjury of oath. I went through all sorts of criminal complaints that I file against them. Okay, I've got a pile right now about 18 inches thick, and each criminal complaint is maybe you know, some of them are 2 pages, some of them are up to 8 or 9 pages at the most, and so there's probably about, well, there's 2 in each one. There's an original and a copy that I got to file into this lawsuit that I got going on, and so there's an original and a copy with attachments, okay, and this police report, or parts of it, are included in attachments. And so they give you great evidence. And so I had a Republic of Texas private property placard, okay, the plate, okay, not a state-issued license right there. Activated his emergency lights, made contact with the sole occupant, and I was on the phone. I dialed 911. I wanted the county sheriff to come to the location, and they refused to come. And so, you know, I tried several times to get the county sheriff, and they didn't want to come. Okay, so then I started reading off this laminated, accused them of official oppression. the Texas Penal Code, and his boss, I was going to sue his butt off, and his bosses showed up, and anyways, they wound up arresting me, and so it kind of went from there. They stole my car. This is evidence of them stealing my car. The bought and paid for clerk masquerading as a judge issued this probable cause determination and commitment order. So then they went and hauled me off to jail. And so they give me all this evidence. This is all great evidence, you know. And so the point being is that always get a police report, because you can use it to break it off in their ass. And I just can't tell you how much that is worth. It's they give you evidence against them. So anyways, does anybody have any questions? I think we're going to wrap it up here for this morning, and we'll come back this afternoon in an hour and a half from when we are done. So now's the time if anybody has any questions. It's war crimes, okay? They engage in war crimes. There's all sorts of them. There's I went through yesterday, there's like 20 or 21 crimes, and there's more today. I went and that I went and got some more that I'm gonna go after them for, from talking today. Holding hostages, propaganda for war. Those are war crimes. Well, like I said, you can email me at engineerwin@yahoo.com. And, you know, I got bills to pay too, so I need donations. If you want me to review documents and stuff like that, I can do that for donations. I can help you with the documents. Again, it's all based on donations, and the donations based on how much you think my time is worth and how much of my time you think you're going to need. And so, you know, that's I never tell people what their donation should be. You just want you to consider how much of my time you think you're going to need and what you think my time is worth. And so does anybody have anything else? This afternoon we're going to go through a presentation on lawyers, on bar members or Satanists, and that's why I like going after bar members. Okay, I love going after bar members and judges. Okay, and that's really, I mean, I'll go after the whole law firm. Matter of fact, with Euless, you know, that's their city attorney is a partner in a law firm, and so I've got criminal complaints against all the partners in the law firm because they're busy profiting from this. And then once I got the criminal complaints done and filed, then I'll use them as evidence in bar grievances. You know, I don't know if I'm going to get any removed, but we'll see. That's all I can tell you. Now the post office, if you're going to use a postal money order, the bank holds funds every time. I don't know why, but they do with postal money orders. So a regular money order from like a 7-Eleven is probably better, because a Western Union or any other kind of money order is probably better, because the bank, when you deposit it, they treat it like a check and it clears within a couple days if they hold funds. Sometimes they don't even hold funds. But if you get a postal money order, then they'll hold the funds for like about a week, and they'll say they don't know if it's a real a real check, they'll call it, and so they gotta, you know, hold it for a week or two, or I have to go to the post office, and sometimes the post office doesn't have the cash, and it's just a hassle. So I'd rather not have postal money orders. Anyways, a regular money order from you know, a bank or a 7-Eleven or something like that is fine, or even a check, you know. Or you can send me PayPal, okay, or cryptocurrencies. I accept cryptocurrencies, and I accept PayPal, and so I'll send you. You send me an email, I'll send you ways that you can pay me. I can do Cash App too. But so this afternoon we're going to be going through a presentation on attorneys number 7, bar members or Satanists. And so that's what we'll be talking about. That's why I like to go after these bar scum, and they're the low-hanging fruit. They're deemed to know the law, okay, and so they are really the ones that we need to be going after, and all of our problems can be traced to a bar member. I can just guarantee you. All of our problems can be traced to bar members. These people are scum. They're the lowest form of life there is. You know, like they say, what do you call 400 lawyers at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean? A good start. Yeah, I'll take gold or silver coin for sure. That's definitely way better. I'll send you one of my price lists, and so then you can, matter of fact, I have one. I can put it up right now if anybody wants to see my price list. I'll put up my price list right now. There we go. My price list, if you look at my price list, cost is in 4, okay, the little star there, you see the star? Well, you come down here and you look at the star, and it says the preferred method of payment is by pieces of silver, 1 troy ounce each, pure silver. As a less desirable alternative, I can accept the commercial paper, the cash, the legal tender, the money order, email money transfer. If you need to make it payable, use Glenn Fern or leave it blank. For PayPal gifts, send to engineerwin@hotmail.com, or for Bitcoin, contact me at engineerwin@hotmail.com. So the prices are in floor, as in 4 1 troy ounce pieces of silver. YouTube collections, 5 1 troy ounce pieces of silver. And if you look in the fine print here, it says that paying by commercial paper, it's $100. And in paying by commercial paper, it's $120. And then the 60 plus searchable law dictionaries, 3, okay, or paying by commercial paper, it's $75. And then all of my exclusive videos. And then the power special is 13, and that's paying by commercial paper, it's $260. And so the point being is that I prefer gold or silver coin. Remember, I talked about that in my video, okay? I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the fake money, the IOUs, the military scrip, the Federal Reserve notes. And so that's my price list. You know, I had a guy, somebody sent me an email, taxman@gmail.com, sent me an email, wanted my price list. So I sent it to him. He never did order anything, but maybe that's why the IRS doesn't bother me, because it's not a privilege. I don't want your Federal Reserve notes. There's no privilege there. I don't want to discharge debt with limited liability. I'd rather pay. And the only way that anything can be paid is with gold or silver coin. And I don't care if it's a silver certificate, it's still an IOU. A silver certificate is a promissory note, is what it is. And so it's still not lawful money. The only lawful money is gold or silver coin. And that's how they have us enslaved, because everybody wants to use this fake money. And all of that's coming to an end soon. So what I would suggest is, matter of fact, I'm not sure if I don't think I had in that presentation anything about my book. I've written a book. Maybe I should put in a little spiel about my book. I think I will. Yep, I did. I didn't have anything in that presentation about my book. So what I'll do is I'll give you a little spiel about my book. I wrote a book. My book, called Trump, A True American Patriot or Not, is now available. Mike Blackwell asked me to write the book. And it actually took me about 2 weeks to write the book, but then because I just took a lawsuit and modified it a little bit, and then he had to babysit me through 6 months to get it ready to publish, and so I put him on as co-author because he did all that babysitting. Anyways, and so that book it's a lawsuit, or it was. It started out that way, and so it's 95% provable facts. Okay, I use court cases, law dictionary definitions, international treaties, all sorts of stuff like that to support everything I say. Very little of it's my opinion, but there is some things that are my opinion. Now, so the interesting thing about it is that Mike, he's a publisher. It's actually Sovereign Press. He's the Sovereign Press, but he hired a company to help us with it, and they wrote the stuff on the back of the book, and this is the back of the book. And so I'm just going to read most of what's on the back of the book because it's pretty good. I think that it just nails it as what's in the book. And so it actually starts off with some of the stuff that Trump said during his 2016 inaugural address. Trump said, "What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. At the center of this movement is a crucial conviction that a nation exists to serve its citizens. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government at the cost of its citizens. Washington flourished, but the insiders refused to share in its wealth. Politicians prospered, but allowed our jobs to leave and our factories to close. Not anymore. And so that's taken from Trump's 2016 inaugural address, and then the people that actually helped us with it put this in. In Trump, a true American patriot or not, Glenn Fern and Mike Blackwell reveal the depths of corruption, deceit, and manipulation infesting our political system for hundreds of years, regardless of political affiliation. Read the hard evidence that exposes how our elected officials sold Americans into slavery. Understand the Founding Fathers' true intent when they formed our Republican form of government. Discover the influence of the satanic Roman cult on our politicians and political system. Does Donald Trump want to transfer power back to we the people? In Trump, you will see the great battle that is upon us. And they nailed it there, because it is a great battle. I think we're in a war, and it's going to last probably, Cliff High says it's going to be 18 years. I think that's probably about right. And some of my opinion, I don't know if any of you know who Jerome Corsi is. This is some of my opinion that's in the book. Jerome Corsi is a guy that lives up in the Northeast. He's got a PhD from Harvard University in political science. He's written a bunch of books. He's got a YouTube channel. There's a YouTube video with him where he says that in 2015, 5 generals came to see him, and they told him that there was a group of generals in the Pentagon that were going to overthrow Obama, and he said, well, you can do that if you want, but you might want to go talk to Donald Trump first. And 6 months later, he gets a phone call. They decided not to overthrow Obama because Donald Trump had agreed to run for president. So that's all provable facts. My opinion is that the entire Trump administration is a giant military psyop. Okay, Trump would be on Twitter and he'd throw out a tweet. It's like he's fishing, and they take the bait and then he reels them in. And so I think that the entire Trump, and I think Trump is still president. I think he won the election. They know he won the election, but they wanted to make they wanted Biden to steal it, and they want to build a case against, because everybody's entitled to due process. Even Bill Barr, the Attorney General, when he was under Trump, even somebody asked him about all these indictments, and Barr even said, I can't speak to any particular case, but everybody's entitled to due process. And so they're building a case. And this is worldwide now. This isn't just America. This is worldwide. And so that's in my opinion, that Trump is still president. There was a YouTube video I saw recently where this guy was talking about, he says he was visited by 2 FBI agents and 2 Secret Service agents. And they went and met him and came to his house, and he said, so what's this about? And they said, well, we can't tell you anything, but we just wanted to make contact with you and let you know that we'll be in touch in the near future. And he said, so I mean, and then he goes and he says, well, I'm former law enforcement, you know, I know what this is I know what that's all about. And he says, so tell me what it's all about. And they wouldn't tell him. And it went back and forth, and they talked for a while, and finally he said, so who's president of the United States? And they said, Donald J. Trump. So I think all of this stuff, it's the Biden show, kind of like the Truman Show. They're building a case. And so, you know, the question is whether we're going to have Trump in office before the midterms or after the midterms. I guess we'll see. I don't know. This is my opinion now. Anyways, you can order the book from Amazon.com or from my website. It's $40 plus shipping. You can, if you prefer the order, either Amazon or my website. The price has gone up. The publisher raised the price. Amazon.com, on my website, SovereigntyInternational.fyi. Amazon.com does not provide autographed books, so if you want the book autographed, You have to order it from my website. If you have something in particular you want the autograph to say, then you're going to have to let me know. Do you want to know the origins of the deep state and who's behind it? It's all in the book. Do you want to know why it's called the Trump administration? Okay, in the law, words are everything. There's nothing that's by accident. Do you want to know what an administration is? Do you want to know how Trump came to be president? Well, I think I just kind of told you, didn't I? Do you want to know who owns Congress? Do you want to know why they're called law enforcement officer? Yes, Congress is owned. Okay, the government, they went bankrupt in 1932, and it's all part of the congressional record, and it's in the book. Do you want to know how you become a slave? Well, actually, that's kind of like tied to Federal Reserve notes. If you think about it, they're bills of credit, right? And so you're living at the expense of the government. That's a pauper, okay? In the Articles of Confederation, it says that freemen. What does it say exactly? Freemen shall have the free egress and ingress across the borders. Fugitives from justice and paupers accepted. if all you have in your wallet is Federal Reserve notes, then you're bankrupt. Okay, and that's why I carry one silver eagle in my wallet at all times, because then I'm not bankrupt. And so if you become a slave because of all you got in your wallet is IOUs, okay, because a Federal Reserve note is an IOU. It's not a promissory note. There's two types of commercial paper. It's commercial paper. There's two types: is promissory notes and IOUs, and I don't care, stocks, bonds, whatever you want to get, will all fall into, it's either a promissory note or an IOU. And a promissory note has to have a promise to pay. They used to say on there that you could go get some silver, the silver certificates or the gold certificates, okay? So that was a promissory note. And but these are IOUs because it just says this note is legal tender. And so they're nothing but IOUs. And so if all you have in your wallets is IOUs from a bankrupt corporation, then you're a pauper, you're bankrupt, you're a slave. You know what the root cause of the War of Independence was? It's the same thing that's happening right now. Do you want to know why every president goes to visit the Pope on their first international trip? Anyways, in reality, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. Thank you, Donald Trump. So do you identify as a belligerent? Actually, according to this judge in this case, a belligerent claimant. I would under that circumstance. I'm not a belligerent otherwise. I'm not a belligerent otherwise. I'm a belligerent claimant. Anyone who has rights had to be a belligerent claimant, according to Alger, a judge. I've got to use a quote in some of my videos. Anyways, if anybody has anything else they want to say or some questions or anything, otherwise we're going to adjourn until this afternoon. We'll give about an hour and a half for lunch. Yeah, JFK was a true patriot. It's really too bad what happened to him. I think that's what really woke a lot of people up. The cabal and the deep state, I mean, that's where, you know, you could call them the same, although there's people behind. I basically, in my book, I go by stuff I can prove, okay? And so there's stuff that's going on that I don't have in there, but I can't prove it. So the stuff that I use, I prove. And that's why I, international treaties, law dictionary definitions, and all that stuff. I think Trump is still president. And I think that it's all that we're going through what's called devolution. And there's a Supreme Court case, actually, in Chisholm versus Georgia. It says that at the revolution, the sovereignty devolved onto the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country, but have none to govern but themselves. The people of America are I can't remember what the rest of it says, but anyways, so devolution, I think it's devolving right now back onto the people. So, anyways, anybody have any more questions? I think what we're going to do is we'll give it about another 5 or 10 minutes at the most and adjourn at 1 o'clock local time. I'm in New Jersey, so it's about 10 minutes to right now, and we'll adjourn till 2:30, and then we'll do the wow. And that reminds me, just a little spiel about the Republic of Texas. I am a senator with the Republic of Texas. If you're in Texas, we have meetings on every Tuesday in mid-cities area near DFW Airport. It kind of moves around. And so send me an email and I'll add you onto the email list if you're interested in coming to the meetings. We also have a Congress once a month on the second Saturday of every month, and you're welcome to come to that and see what goes on with that. What happened is in the 90s, what happened is when any sovereign nation becomes part of another sovereign nation, they do a treaty of annexation. And Texas actually did do a treaty of annexation, and they sent it to the U.S. Senate for approval and adoption, which is what they should have done, but they didn't. They shelved it. And what they did was a House Joint Resolution. And so Texas never really did join the Union. I think that, there's a Confederacy and there's a Union. There's two separate entities. I think Texas might have joined the Confederacy under the Articles of Confederation, okay? And that's why they only did a House Joint Resolution. But the Texas didn't join the Union. That's why everything's different in Texas, too. Texas, there's a East Coast power grid and a West Coast power grid that basically goes down to the middle of the country. And then there's a Texas power grid. Everything's different in Texas, I'm telling you. There's a lot of stuff that's different. And so Texas never, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, on the Secretary of State's website, they were advertising she was going on some international trip, and Texas was listed as one of the foreign countries she was going to visit. I'm telling you, everything's different in Texas. So anyways, some people figured this out back in the 90s. And what they did is they formed a provisional government of the Republic of Texas. You look at what happens what you look at what happens in the when the U.S. goes in like a nation building, right? Well, they form a provisional government, and so we formed a provisional government of the Republic of Texas, and we held elections, and then it became the real government of the Republic of Texas, and we've been operating ever since. And I'm a senator, and they're saying, is a Texas court case? There's a Texas court, state of Texas versus Republic of Texas ruling or opinion. Is this true? Yes, there is. And there's a Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court dismissed the case for lack of jurisdiction, and I've got that. And so so we are the real government of the Republic of Texas, and we've been operating since the mid-90s, and we hold elections. And if you want to participate in your lawful government, if you're in Texas, we need people to participate. If you're not in Texas, you can still participate, but you can't vote. And so there's ways. We passed some legislation recently that allows people who are not on the land of Texas to get a Republic of Texas ID card and participate, from a distance. And you have to live on the land of Texas for 6 months before you can become a citizen. Become to be a vote, not a citizen, but to vote, and so to vote in the elections. And so that's under the 1836 Texas Constitution. So, anyways, there's. I think that we're the only de jure government operating on the planet. The rest of them are all de facto, but I think Trump is doing a lot of changes too. There's a lot of things happening, and so it's a great time to live. There's certainly a lot of bad things that are happening, but it's all coming to light. I think we're looking at living in Book of Revelations time, and Bull Polney, who is someone I kind of like listening to his videos, he says that it's a time of revealing of the truth. Okay, that's why it's called Book of Revelations. So anyways, the revealing of the truth. And so if you want to participate, that's available to you as well. And we have a website. It's called thetexasrepublic.com. And you can, friend of mine, the vice president, actually, Mike Blackwell, he's a co-author of my book. He's the vice president of the Republic of Texas. And he just sent me a text saying that the republicoftexas.com website had 5,874 hits in the last 30 days, and we're ranked at 91% of the best performing websites, which is kind of interesting. Anyways, so if you want to find an address, find where we meet every second Saturday of every month, then there's a map. You can go there, and there'll be a map where you can find where the actual location. It's always the same location. It's in Keene, Texas, and so hopefully we see you there. Anyways, I think we're gonna cash it in. Appreciate everybody listening in, and let's get together this afternoon. Bye for now.